Welcome back. This is the Proof of Concept, and I am Jared Derival. Today, like in all the other episodes, we're going to have 3 segments. Executive briefing is the first, the second is technical deep dive, and the third and last will be cyber job alert. Executive briefing is where we speak to executives, CISOs, CIOs, directors, managers, etc. about emerging technologies, latest trends in IT and in cybersecurity. In the technical deep dive, we continue the conversation, except this time we speak to technical resources. We go real deeply into technical concepts so that we can arm you with the information that you need to help the executives achieve their goals. In the third and final segment is dedicated to cyber security in IT job seekers. Think about entry-level job seekers, mid-level professionals, and seasoned professionals who are in the job market. We provide you with the facts about what the jobs are and how to position yourself to compete properly in the job market. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Executive Briefing. In this episode, we continue the conversation about the importance of next-generation firewalls in a zero-trust architecture. This is the theme for this entire season, which will be made of 6 episodes. This is the second. Zero-trust network architecture. Most institutions are either moving towards a zero-trust network architecture, that means they have started the journey, or they are thinking about starting the journey, so they are planning to start. Plenty of executives and even technical resources at times think that they can buy some technology, plug it in, and turn it on, and then they achieve zero trust, only to find out that this is not how it works. You cannot buy a zero trust switch, a zero trust firewall, or any zero trust system. There is no such thing. It is a concept. The zero trust itself is a concept. It is achieved through a proper architecture. That means the systems that you have today likely are enough to help you achieve a zero trust network architecture. What you need is to architect them, design them, put them together, and configure them properly. What are these systems? Let's think about them. All institutions have firewalls, routers, switches, access points. Some have network access controls. Most institutions also have a user identity database, or Microsoft Active Directory in most cases, and some have cloud identity such as Microsoft Azure Active Directory. These systems and many others are the ones that you need to architect in such fashion to achieve the zero trust network architecture. That means you understand what the most valuable asset is. We call this the DAS, the data asset access and services. You understand who needs access to it, when and how they need access to it, and you achieve these things, right? With the least privilege philosophy in mind. So everybody has a role that gives them access to the specific portion of the network that they need to have access to. For that, you need to be able to identify them properly, know where the data lives, and how people transit over the network to get to the data, and what type of data is the most valuable. Folks, to get there, I believe you need to look very deeply into your architecture. But where in the design do you look? You look first at your firewalls. So this conversation, I have to say, requires that you replace your old stateful firewalls with next-generation firewalls. Yeah, I'm talking about next-generation firewalls. Why do you need next-generation firewalls in a zero-trust network architecture first? In the modern days, old stateful firewalls such as ASAs are no longer enough to defend your network against modern threats. Why is that? Because old firewalls only care about the source, the destination, and the port that the traffic presents itself on. That means some ports are trusted and some ports are not trusted. Think about web traffic, right? 443, we trust. Port 80, we do not trust. That is bad. Why is this bad? That is because the attackers now, they understand if they present themselves on port 443, you will trust them. And if they present on port 80 or any other port, you will not trust them with your web traffic. As a result of that, they will encrypt their bad traffic and present it on the port that you trust, and you will allow it because you have an old stateful firewall that does not understand more than that. That's why you need to have next-generation firewalls, because next-generation firewalls, they go way further than that. They do not just care about the source IP address, the destination IP address, and the port that the traffic presents itself on. They take into account much more telemetry than that to make that decision and to defend your network. They understand who is sending the traffic. They understand what. That is very important. What the traffic is made of. That's content ID. Understanding the user. That's user ID. They understand what applications are being used for that traffic. In the case of the web traffic, you used to understand port 443 is web traffic, but now they understand. They can identify this is SSL. And not only that, they can decrypt the encrypted SSL traffic to provide deeper inspection into what's being transacted. This way, malicious actors stand zero chance of penetrating your network without your knowledge if you configure your next generation firewalls properly, and especially if you have the best next generation firewalls. Gartner classifies Palo Alto, Fortinet, and Checkpoint as the leaders of next generation enterprise firewalls. I suggest that you look into one of these if you're very serious about protecting your network against next generation threats. Now understand there are a bunch of other reasons why you may not be able to switch from one vendor to the other. Maybe your team only knows Cisco and you have deep investment in Cisco. Maybe you already have Cisco Eyes, TelFwatch, you have Cisco VPN, etc., and you may not be able to remove your Cisco firewalls and go to Palo Alto or any other. But Palo Alto also makes next generation firewalls. They're just not the leaders in next generation firewalls currently. Okay, with that out of the way, the understanding that you're going to replace your old stateful firewalls, and you must do that and now start leveraging next generation firewalls, let me give you a few pointers about where to start. First, look at the architecture. Have an architecture assessment. But what do you look for in an architecture assessment that is moving you towards a zero trust network architecture? First thing you need to do is to understand where your routing takes place. The routing is key, and I'll tell you why. Look at this network that I have here. This is like most networks that you will encounter in an enterprise environment. It will be made of some type of three-tier architecture. The three-tier architecture is here to stay and is well respected. You'll have a core, a distribution, and an access layers. These three layers are the main layers of the corporate network. When you don't have a justification or probably not the budget to have separate core and distribution, you can collapse them and have a collapsed core. But you'll find most networks to have access where you plug the laptops, the printers, etc., and something that stands in between that and the firewalls. Now, the problem is not the architecture itself, the three-tier architecture, but it is rather the fact that most networks have the routing at the core. So those VLANs that are on those access switches, they will have their gateways on the core most of the time. In the core will be a layer 3 switch that will be routing between those different VLANs. So inter-VLAN routing happens at the core. That is bad. Why? That is because the firewall never sees the inter-VLAN traffic. That's lateral movement. You would want to move that. Move your gateways from your core to your firewalls. Now understand that this implies a few things. Now the firewalls are going to be more loaded, right? They're going to have more work to do. But next generation firewalls, especially latest gears, they are made for that. So of course you need to size them appropriately. If you're going to send more traffic to them, probably you're going to have to aggregate interfaces. Instead of having one interface here now, you could have two interfaces, double these interfaces so that you can now start having more bandwidth, right, between your core and your distribution. The core will be rendered nothing but a layer 2 device. You see that? You have aggregation between your core and your distribution. You move the gateways of the VLANs from the core to the firewalls. As a result of that, let's say you have two subnets, two VLANs here at the access, where you have two different PCs connected on the network. Now, those two different PCs, let's say HR and accounting, before, if someone was on the HR VLAN, they wanted to communicate with the accounting VLAN, they would forward their traffic to their gateways, which used to be on the core switch, and the core switch would route between the two VLANs. Now you move that, you move the gateways from the core to the firewall. The switch will no longer be the device that routes between the two VLANs. It's going to be the job of the firewall. That is a much better posture. Why is this a much better posture? The switch routes, but it doesn't understand what it's routing. It cannot protect you very deeply against modern threats. Of course, you can have ACLs and you can restrict here, there, but that is a very clunky thing to do and very cumbersome, very difficult compared to a next generation firewall that is made to inspect traffic when it's coming from one zone to another, from one subnet to another, from one VLAN to another, from one area to another, right? In the next generation firewall, not only does it inspect the traffic to see if there's a rule to allow it, but it provides way more intelligence than just traffic inspection. It can understand who is sending the traffic. You can say, as a result of user identification, that a feature that the next generation firewall has, you can say, okay, when the traffic is coming from HR and it's going to accounting, if it came from the director, allow. But if it didn't come from the director, do not allow. You couldn't do that with a switch. It would be very difficult to achieve that. In addition to that, you can decrypt the traffic that is coming from this VLAN to the other. And if it is malicious traffic, you will understand. You see, nowadays, our threat actors no longer break through your network, brute force through your network, or come and walk into the building and try to get a hold of your switches, etc., etc. What they do is that they compromise your network through more intelligent means. And most of the threats that you'll be exposed to will come to you through some type of phishing campaign. And someone from HR will click on the bad link, they'll be compromised, and the threat actor will now compromise their credentials, and they'll be pretending to be them, right? The zero trust architecture invites you to trust exactly the right person. As a result of the next generation firewalls that you now put in between the traffic between the two VLANs, it will provide you with the ability to unquestionably identify who's sending this traffic. Why? Even if a malicious actor were to get a hold of this person's credential, there will be what's called UEBA, User and Entity Behavior Analytics. This person in HR had a profile, a baseline profile, what they do on a regular basis. Now that the malicious actor has gotten a hold of their credentials, they'll be performing other types of activities. And your UEBA, together with your next generation firewall, will now identify that there has been a major deviation in the person's way of transacting on the network. And that would be enough for your next generation firewall to start denying this traffic, because it understands, although the traffic appears that it's coming from this person that we would normally trust, what is being done is not normal for this person, because we have baselined this person's normal behavior on the network. Your next generation firewall can do that and much more for you. We're going to continue the conversation, and next time we speak in the proof of concept, we're going to talk about how to achieve microsegmentation. You start moving towards the microsegmentation now that you have moved the gateways from the switch to the next generation firewall. I'm going to also invite you to have a VLAN for each department. The accounting department needs to have its own VLAN. HR department and all of the other departments need to have their own VLANs. There are a bunch of features that the next generation firewalls provide that put you closer and in a much better security posture than an old stateful firewall or a switch that is doing your inter-VLAN routing, etc. So today, the takeaway is you need next generation firewalls. But more importantly, you need to remove your switches from doing inter-VLAN routing. You need to move all of your gateways to your next generation firewalls and render your core switches nothing but layer 2 devices. Thank you. See you next time. In this segment, we're going to go real deeply into what it takes for you to leverage your next generation firewall to fully secure your network as you adopt a zero trust network architecture. Let's jump right in. In most networks, probably your network as well as a technical resource, you will have this architecture that you're looking at on the screen right here. It is made of a 3-tier network architecture. You have a core, a distribution, and an access layer. Now, sometimes the core and the distribution can be collapsed into one, right? A collapsed core. But sometimes as well, you'll have a separate group of devices for the core, maybe a pair of catalysts or a pair of nexus or even a stack of devices made of more than 2 switches. As your core, you'll have your distribution separated and you have your access. Your access is where you connect your PCs, your printers, cameras, endpoints. Your distribution is what stands between your core and your access. That gives you a cleaner network. And you can collapse those two as we just mentioned. Now, this architecture is not going away, and most networks will continue to leverage this architecture. Here's what the problem is. Most networks also have their routing on the core. So switches are routing between your VLANs for you. Now that used to be okay. You used to use ACLs to restrict this traffic, but this is no longer capable of protecting you in the modern days. Why? That is because cyber defense and cyber threats have been more sophisticated. And threat actors, now they can crawl on your network for a long period of time, collecting all kinds of information, conducting reconnaissance before they decide to take over. And most of the threats nowadays, they don't brute force into your environment. What they do is that they attack your employers, or they attack your employees through a phishing campaign. In that phishing campaign will compromise credentials of key members of your institution. And these credentials will be used by threat actors to now crawl on your network and collect as much information as possible silently without you ever knowing about that for months. And one day you'll come to work and you'll realize that you're under attack. Now, how do you prevent that? You need to move towards micro-segmentation. You need to make sure that you're aware of the lateral movement. As traffic goes from one VLAN to the other, you need to be aware. The switch is not aware like a firewall. And a firewall here means a next-generation firewall. So this conversation implies that you have next-generation firewalls in your environment. If you have old stateful firewalls such as ASAs, you need to replace these as quickly as possible with next-generation firewalls. Palo Alto leads the way, but you also have Fortinet, you have Checkpoint, you have Cisco Firepower, right? And many other lower budget next generation firewalls that you can purchase today. But they are better than an old stateful firewall. Why? That is because an old stateful firewall is kind of like a switch or a router. It uses ACLs. You allow denied traffic based on the source, the destination, and ports. Bad actors now understand that you trust some ports and you don't trust other ports. And so if they want to compromise you, they'll deliver the traffic on the port that you trust. And you're going to trust the traffic because the firewall is not aware of more than just the IP and the ports. And then the next generation firewall is a firewall that expands every day. So the firewall you used to have yesterday, like 24 hours ago, is no longer the same firewall that you have today. If you have a Palo Alto firewall today, when you wake up tomorrow, you're going to have another Palo Alto firewall, one that is more capable. Why is that true? That is because the firewall will receive threat updates, application updates. They'll have antivirus updates. They'll receive a wildfire if it's a Palo Alto firewall. The wildfire is a sandbox that provides protection against zero-day vulnerabilities, right? So vulnerabilities that were discovered today, tomorrow Palo Alto will publish an update to protect you against that. If you have a subscription that you pay Palo Alto for, you will receive these updates within minutes. And when your environment is under attack, and this attack is presented by a zero-day malware, one that no one in the world is able to protect against, the next generation firewall, whether it's Palo Alto or others, has this capability of taking a sample of this file and forwarding it to the cloud sandbox. In the case of the Palo Alto, the cloud sandbox is called Wildfire. The Wildfire cloud will analyze this sample, and within minutes they will render a verdict, whether this is malicious or not malicious. If it is malicious, they send an update to your firewall, and your firewall starts to protect your environment against this threat. Now, even if you don't have the license, you will still receive this update, but you will receive it the next day, okay? So your next generation firewall is that capable. But in addition to this that I just mentioned, the dynamic updates, the firewall also is application aware. That means it doesn't just allow a denied traffic based on the port, it allows it by knowing the application and whether the application is using a standard port or the session is using a standard port that the application should use or a non-standard port. It is aware of the users that's sending the traffic so that you can allow traffic based on who is sending the traffic, right? Or deny, for that matter. It is also aware of the content. And by the content, I mean anything that you can think about. The content here can mean, oh, is this a PDF file? But it can also mean, is this a PDF file that has 5 social security numbers or more? Or if this is a PDF file that has the word confidential written on it, the firewall can be aware of that. And it can deny because it says this person is forwarding a PDF file that has the word confidential written on it. And it will know who the person is. It will know that this is a PDF file. It will know that the content has the word confidential, or the content has 5 social security numbers, the content has a test result, etc., etc. You want to have that level of capability. You want to have that level of telemetry to be able to defend your network against modern cyber threats. That's why you need a next generation firewall. With that out of the way, let's see how you can position your next generation firewall to get the best out of it. Look at this diagram over here. That's what most networks would have, right? A 3-tier architecture: core, distribution, and access. Access for endpoints, PCs, printers, cameras, etc. Distribution to make the separation between the access and the core. And the core would be the routing device. So as people move from one VLAN to another, the core will be the device that does that. But understand that the core is a switch, not a firewall, not a next generation firewall like the one we just described. So the switch is not able to protect you like the next generation firewall can. So the next generation firewall is also a switch. It is also a router. But more than that, it is a next generation firewall, a device that becomes better every day. Now, you want to move your routing from the switch to the more capable device. And this is a simple change. You just move the gateways. Instead of having SVIs on your core switch, you move those SVIs into sub-interfaces on your next generation firewalls. Look at this over here. I'm using a console server to log into a switch here. And so on this switch, I can have an SVI. I can create an SVI I can create a VLAN. Let's call this VLAN 700. I'm creating VLAN 700 and I'm going to name this VLAN demo POC IT. Okay, I'm going to create another VLAN 701. And I'm going to name this VLAN demo POC HR. Okay, I can create an SVI for each one of these VLANs if I want. Interface VLAN 700, IP address 10 or maybe 172.16. I don't want conflict with anything else. That 1, that, or that 70 because of the 700. That one. That's an SVI here. Oh, I need to put address. Okay. I need to put subnet mask 255.255.255.0. Simple. Okay. Now I'm going to do the same thing for interface VLAN 701. IP address will be 71. That one. You see, what I have done here is that this switch is now routing between those two VLANs for me. And here it is. I can ping. We're going to ping now from 172.16.70.1. All right. And voila. I'm pinging between those two interfaces. What that means, folks, HR is sending packets or establishing sessions with IT or vice versa. And that's only within the switch. The firewall is not aware of that, right? Now, to move that gateway from the switch to the firewall is a simple thing. All I need to do is to shut down my SVI. Here's what you need to do. The planning process is crucial. Of course, this is a student network. My students learn on this network here, and we have a bit more freedom. But if you're doing this in a production environment, you need to be more careful. And here's what I mean by that. You need to plan that very carefully. It's not a big change, but you need to make the executives aware to get buy-in. But you more importantly need to make sure that you cause no disruption. And here's what I mean by that. You used to have your core switches as your layer 3 device. Now you're going to have your firewall as your layer 3 device. That means you're going to have more traffic going through your firewall. If you're going to have more traffic going through your firewall, you probably will need to account for that extra traffic. Is your firewall getting close to being saturated? If that is true, then you may not be able to do that until you have bigger firewalls. But what about the bandwidth, the links between the core and the distribution? They're gonna have more traffic going over them now, right? You need to plan for these appropriately. And one of the things that you can do is to come and find out how much resource is your firewall using right now. Look at that. Management here is 13%. Data plane CPU is 0%, right? So this is a firewall that can support a whole lot more traffic than that, right? Session counts, 253 out of 200,000 sessions that we can support. This is doing very well, right? And you might want to also check the throughput that you're putting on your links. If you're getting near saturation, you need to double your links, or triple or quadruple, have more links, right? And you can aggregate interfaces from your core switch to your firewalls. Obviously, for that, you need to have available interfaces. You need to make sure you have SFPs, etc., and aggregate enough links to have enough bandwidth on your links between core and firewall. Now that firewall is going to be the router. But in addition to the firewall being the router, what you're going to need to do as well, you're going to now add a policy. Now, for you to use the firewall as your router, you're going to now have a policy that allows this specific traffic. But look at the beauty of having this. Now I'm going to allow demo IT to HR. That's just the name of the rule, to demo HR. And so the source of this rule for me will be demo IT. The source will be demo IT, right? I need to choose the zone demo IT. The destination will be demo HR. The application now will be ping, because I'm just going to ping, right? And I think ICMP. In the interest of time, I'm adding both of these. And the service, which is the port now, is default. That is the default port for this application. If the session is using a non-standard port, it will be denied. But more important than that, I'm going to add profiles. The action will be allowed, but I'm going to add profiles to that. Look at what I can do. Antivirus profile, right? I can even create a new antivirus profile, but I'm using the default. Vulnerability profile, strict vulnerability profile. If I want, I can customize and create another one. Anti-spyware, strict. URL filtering, right? Default one, okay? So URL filtering here is where you can say, I'm going to deny some category here that is not necessary for the building, maybe adult content, right? Etc., etc. But for sure, I want to make sure that I deny command and control, right? That's where hackers are commanding your servers to do whatever they want, etc., etc. So that's URL filtering. You pay a license specifically for that, and you want to make sure that you leverage it. I'm going to use this default one. That's a profile that I created myself. File blocking here, strict file blocking. And look at what this does for you folks. File blocking here means you're blocking files, right? I'm going to show you the strict file blocking profile. The strict file blocking profile, it prevents the device from downloading bad files and installing them on your devices. Many malicious actors rely on files being downloaded and installed on your devices for them to compromise them. The file blocking profile will prevent that. Data filtering, you could create that if you want, but wildfire, you must have that, right? That's where the firewall is going to protect you against zero-day malware. A sample of the file is going to be taken and forwarded to the cloud, where the Palo Alto cloud analyzes the file and render a verdict, whether this is malware or not malware. If it is malware, it starts protecting your firewall within minutes. If you don't have the wildfire license, you still get this protection, but the next day. Look at that. Now, look at the source. It's only going to allow from the demo IT to the destination demo HR. The application is going to be only these applications, and the ports, it's got to be standard ports for these applications. Otherwise, it will be denied. It will be allowed. That's the action. That means the first action. If those conditions are met, it will be allowed. But beyond that, it's going to monitor for these things. If ever it sees virus, it sees spyware, it sees any of these things being violated here, it will reset the session. That means it will stop the session. And that's massive amount of protection for you. A big step towards the zero trust architecture. And all you have done so far is that you have moved your gateways from your core switch to your next generation firewall. Now, you have also added a firewall wall that is loaded with next generation firewall capabilities. Now, in addition to that, you could have also done more than that, right? And we're probably going to go in more details into that the next time, but let's find the wall that's called demo HR. Allow demo IT to demo HR here. The source could have also been user aware. This rule is application aware, but it could have also been user aware. We could have added a source user group here, right? To allow only certain users. We could have added even some devices here to allow only certain devices. You could have added the subnet here, same thing for the destination. You see that? That's way more capabilities that you have with the next generation firewall that you didn't have when your switch was doing your routing for you. First step, folks, in moving towards a zero trust architecture is to leverage all of the capabilities, if not all, many or all of the appropriate capabilities of the next generation firewall in your network. And today we have seen how we instantly achieve a much better posture by simply moving your gateways or moving your routing from your core switch to your next generation firewall. I'm Jared Derval, and this was a technical deep dive of the proof of concept. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the proof of concept. I'm Jared Derval, and this segment is Cyber Job Alert. This is where we speak to IT or cybersecurity job seekers, regardless of the level, whether you're entry level, mid-level, or senior professionals. We bring you the facts about where the jobs are and how you can position yourself to attract your dream job. We do that by providing you with first the fact, then the training and the education opportunities for you to position yourself ahead of the group. New data from IT staffing firm Experis found that more than 3/4, that is exactly 78% of IT organizations reported difficulty finding qualified tech workers. This is a 17-year high. It has never been that high in more than 17 years. Folks, this is good news for you as an IT or cybersecurity job seeker, regardless of your level. Now understand as well that it has been reported that the big tech layoffs that we experienced earlier in this year, 2023, is now over. Genco and Associates publish twice a year. That's once in January and once in July. And in the latest report, not only did they mention that the big tech layoffs is over, but also IT salaries has risen, and it is expected to go as high as 8% this year. That means someone who was making $200,000 last year, this year, they expected to make $216,000. That is good news, folks. Now, although that is good news, it is still challenging for entry-level professionals. So we're going to divide this cyber job alert into 3 segments. The first, we're going to speak to the entry-level IT or cybersecurity job seekers. It is still challenging for these folks at the bottom. Why? I believe it is for a number of reasons. The first of them is because of lack of guidance. There's not enough guidance for them to know where to go and how to attract their dream jobs, how to even prepare for these jobs. I see on social media that a lot of people are saying that entry-level jobs should be entry-level. That means they require no experience. It cannot be that way for IT or cybersecurity. Why? That is because when you present yourself as an IT or cybersecurity professional, it is similar to presenting yourself as a lawyer or as a medical doctor. You have to have some type of training, some type of experience. A doctor doesn't just wake up and say, oh, I'm an entry-level doctor and I don't need any experience. An IT professional has big responsibilities. They may not be a doctor, but they are an IT professional. They are in charge of moving the world. Think about if you hire someone as an IT professional that works for a bank. Even if they are entry-level, they need to understand, because a simple mistake can take the whole system of the bank down, and customers cannot process their payments, their transactions, etc. That is big issues. That can happen to an airline, and airplanes cannot fly. That can happen to a hospital. Operations, surgeries cannot be performed. So IT professionals and cybersecurity professionals have big responsibilities. And for you to be capable of responding or delivering on the responsibilities that are going to be put on you, you need some type of training. Now, the way IT professionals are trained nowadays is also a problem. You see, the IT vendors, Cisco, Palo Alto, Checkpoint, you name any number of them, I don't think they are helping the best way that they could. They keep the technologies too hidden and too, I would say, secret. And entry-level professionals, not only are they likely not to even know about the emerging technologies, the technologies that can really get them hired, but also even if they were to know about them, they can't get their hands on them. And most of the trainings are done through videos. You buy Cisco training, you watch videos, or you have a simulator, which is a software that pretends to be the system that you're going to work with. It will never be like the system that you're going to work. Now, the technology vendors do not make it easy for the entry-level professionals to get their hands on their technologies. Think about a Palo Alto firewall. If you're an entry-level person, you can't get your hands on a Palo Alto firewall. If you go to college, the community college professor will likely not ever have implemented a Palo Alto firewall before, let alone have one for them to train you on. It is too expensive. It is too difficult to maintain. And if you go to technical school, same thing. If you even go to Palo Alto themselves, right? They have lots of classes that they provide, but it's just videos. I don't think training should be a place where people come to be taught. I think training should be a place where people come to have some type of guarantee that they will not walk out the same way that they walked in. That means the training providers need to guarantee that the learner will learn. And I think that's the reason why the learner pays or invests their time, even if the training might be free in some instances. They are here to ensure that whoever's providing the training gives them the guarantee that they will learn. If they suspect that they can't learn, they should be able to remove them from this program. That's how school was designed to be. When you go to college, the college should be monitoring your performance. And if you can't meet certain standards, they should remove you from this program. But unfortunately, plenty of the institutions that are providing the training, whether it is the technology vendors or other individuals, some of them have very good intention. They only focus on teaching, but not a guarantee that the learner will learn. I think it should be the other way around. The teaching is free. The teaching is easy. It is everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere on the internet. Whenever a firewall or any piece of technology is made, there is a book that comes with it. And this book is likely published on the internet. It is called the implementation guide, the administration guide, or whatever guide, right? It's like a manual. Think about a 40NAC system. There is a 40NAC implementation guide. Think about a Palo Alto firewall, a Cisco firewall, etc., etc. The library of information is vast, so people can be taught. Teaching is easy, but guaranteeing that people learn, I think, is what is missing. As an entry-level professional, I think you will find that it is very difficult for people to break through in the IT field. Even if there's good news, there are more jobs than there are job seekers. But you, as a person who's fresh to the field, you're going to have more difficult time finding the right job. But how do you position yourself to guarantee success? First, you need to get your hands on real technologies. You need to find a place. Wherever you go to look for your training, ask them, do you guarantee that I will learn? How do you ensure that I will learn? And how do you ensure that what I'm learning here will give me a job? I am helping solve this problem through Magna Cyber Academy. This is a skills factory where we provide people access to real technologies, real Palo Alto, real Cisco, real Fortinet, real VMware, real Microsoft, real Azure, and they build real complex networks on real enterprise systems. And not only that, we guarantee that they will learn. If we have any doubt that they will learn, we will reimburse them and say goodbye within the first 30 days. So how do we guarantee that? We built a proprietary system. And this proprietary system monitors the student's behavior. Most people who want to study IT will end up being discouraged because of how complex IT might be. Not only do we make the IT training simpler, we also guarantee that the learner who has the time and the ability to learn will have a more pleasant experience. And if we can't guarantee that, we will detect that within the first 30 days and give them their money back. So you pay to learn, not to just be taught. And I think that's the difference between traditional training and all of the trainings that are out there in what Magna Cyber Academy provides. Folks, now let's talk about the mid-level professionals. It is still hard for some people to transition from a job to a better job. Why? That is because plenty of the times in the institution that they work, they don't have access to the emerging technologies. Now, how do you solve that? You can find an institution like Magna Cyber Academy that provides hands-on training and helps people transition from mid-career jobs to higher-level jobs by exposing them to next-generation technologies. But you can also invest in next-generation technologies yourself. Two ways that you can do that. You can encourage your employers to get a proof of concept. So if your employer is moving towards a zero trust architecture, you know that they're going to need to have next-generation firewall. That's our recommendation here. Then ask them to have a proof of concept of next-generation firewalls. This proof of concept will put you ahead of the curve in that you will be in the forefront implementing this next-generation firewalls, but not in a real production environment, in a proof of concept, right? And as a result of that, you will learn this next-generation firewall. And if you are planning a NAC implementation, get a proof of concept. And that's one way mid-level professionals can position themselves for success. If you are a seasoned professional, well, I encourage you to continue to learn. But more importantly, I want you to be aware that the outlook for the IT and cybersecurity job market is getting better and better. So now is a good time for you to think about finding a way to improve your salary, double your salary, or increase your salary. Folks, that was Cyber Job Alert. We do that in every episode of the Proof of Concept. This is where we provide facts to IT professionals and cybersecurity professionals and show them how they can position themselves to increase their career earnings. So I want to thank you, and I'll catch you up next time. Thank you. I'm Jared Derival, and this is my Proof of Concept.